Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final day of the Island Finance Forum. My name is James Elsmore, and I'm delighted to be moderating this panel discussion, Facing a Formidable Future, Pandemic Recovery Strategies to Spur Economic Growth. So as you know, this week we've had some very broad-ranging conversations about opportunities for islands to look at new growth and to rebuild and to build and strengthen their local economies. Of course, one major way of doing that is through tourism, and this panel we do have speakers looking at tourism, but we're also looking at this through a more broad strategy of how can small-scale industries be built in island communities that often have certain limitations. So we know that the pandemic has had a wide range of impacts on island communities and has also pressured healthcare services, has damaged tourism, and has reduced economic resilience. And so we want to bring together the government side of things with looking at investor opportunities and see what strategies can be taken in this recovery process as we hopefully exit the pandemic and look forward to a brighter future. So I'm delighted in this session that we'll be starting off with a keynote by the Honourable Wayne Payton, the Premier of the Cayman Islands, and then we will have three individual interventions from Matthew Joshua, the Head of Tourism in St. Helena, Diarmuid Lawler, the Associate Director at the Scottish Futures Trust, and finally Carolina Mendonça, the Azores Destination Marketing Coordinator at the Azores Government. With that, I will hand over to our opening keynote, which, as I mentioned, is the Honourable Premier Wayne Payton of the Cayman Islands.
When the Cayman Islands were sighted by Christopher Columbus in 1503, only turtles, iguanas, and other species of native wildlife called these islands home. Permanent settlement began in the early 1700s, and for the next 250 years, island life changed very little. In the 1950s, the Cayman Islands were described as the islands time forgot. But time quickly caught up with our islands. From 1970 to 1990, our population grew by 300%, from approximately 10,000 to 40,000 people. And based on preliminary data from the 2021 census, more than 70,000 people now call our islands home. Good day. My name is Wayne Payton. I am the Premier of the Cayman Islands and Minister for the newly established Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency. And I'm delighted to be speaking at Island Innovation's 2022 Island Finance Forum. When my administration came into office last year, it was with a clear understanding of the values that guide us: people-driven, accountable, competent, and transparent, and an overarching goal of improving the lives and welfare of all of our people. The climate crisis poses an existential threat to the safety and security of our people, the health and viability of our natural environment, and the resilience of our economy. Though small island nations contribute the least to global greenhouse emissions, we are on the front lines of climate change. Collectively, we are canaries in the coal mine for evidence of a rapidly warming world and rising sea levels. But we're also examples of untapped resilience. According to an October 2021 UN report entitled Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, Development and Uses, Cayman is listed among the 30 most vulnerable countries on the structural dimension. However, we are not amongst the top 30 most vulnerable in the environmental or economic dimensions. Though environmental and economic risks are inextricably linked, it's the economic dimension of climate resiliency I would like to focus on today. The Cayman Islands is known around the world sometimes in ways we don't agree with, for our status as an offshore financial center and tax-neutral jurisdiction. Through our financial industry, it is likely the Cayman Islands actually has a significant impact already in facilitating investment that enhances climate resiliency, adaptation, and mitigation throughout the world. We are actively working to expand that influence through the Commonwealth Climate Growth Fund. The large-scale economic transformation needed to tackle climate change can only result if there is wide-scale involvement of business and private sector capital. We need to address the seemingly intractable problem of providing finance at scale for truly transformative investments in sustainability, especially in emerging economies. One of the stated objectives of the Climate Growth Fund is to be an enabling mechanism for climate mitigation and adaptation throughout the 54 member countries of the Commonwealth. By pledging $25 million as the fund's seed capital, the Cayman Islands government demonstrated its own commitment to the viability of the fund. With expected capital of $1 billion US, the Commonwealth Climate Growth Fund aligns market incentives with investments in long-lasting adaptation, mitigation, and resilience in the Commonwealth's emerging economies. It promises to overcome existing funding gaps in crucial areas of investment-ready, sustainable development projects, such as water scarcity and dire lack of sanitation, green energy, transport, and sustainable agriculture, and has the potential to unleash finance of blue economies. With the significant role that the Cayman Islands plays in global finance and in innovative fund management, we can use our influence to be a catalyst and a leader in harnessing private capital and the power of markets to accelerate sustainable development across the Commonwealth, including our fellow British Overseas Territories, as well as the Crown dependencies. While we hope this fund will be the first of many that will benefit people and planet, we also recognize the important steps we need to take within our own countries to advance renewable energy, sustainable transport, holistic development planning, solid waste and wastewater management, and a strategic approach to managing our natural assets to help reduce our climate change risk. We hope to follow the example of Bermuda, which purchased 30 electric buses to replace aged diesel buses and transition towards a zero-emissions fleet. The example of the British Virgin Islands, whose government established a climate change trust fund in 2015 following the passage of a climate change policy in 2012, and the example set by Turks and Caicos, which has protected more than 44% of its terrestrial environment, according to the World Bank. As the rest of the world dismisses our vibrant communities and resilient natural environments as sinking islands, we know better. Islands are not insular and isolated. We are interconnected and dynamic. We live at the nexus of land, sea, and sky, where the only constant is change. We persist, we adapt, we thrive. The resourcefulness, ingenuity, creativity, and collaboration that sustained us for hundreds of years are the keys for addressing the challenges of climate change, perhaps the greatest risk our countries have ever faced. Now is the time to lean on each other's strengths, learn from each other's experiences, build on each other's successes, and support each other in times of need. That is how we will ensure future generations can continue to call our shores home. How we will ensure the children of tomorrow can play in the waves, rest under the shade of sea grape trees, and eat mangoes straight off the trees, and seek their own happiness, peace, and prosperity. That is our responsibility, and that should be our legacy.
And thank you so much to the Premier and to the Cayman Islands government for making that submission. It's fantastic to hear those efforts that are taking place there. And we're also thrilled to have had such a great involvement at this forum from the UK Overseas Territories in their very diverse forms. Which brings me nicely on to the next speaker. I'd like to invite Matthew Joshua, the head of tourism for the St. Helena government, to join me on screen. Good morning, Matthew. How are things in St. Helena?
Good morning, James. Early start for us, but very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that you being up early. And I wanted to give a particular thanks to you and all your colleagues at the St. Helena government. St. Helena have been so involved in this week's event, and I hope it's been very useful for the island, but also we're very happy to see so much participation and multiple speakers looking at different aspects of the island's economy. So really, really appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll hand over to you to give your presentation.
Thank you, sir. I'm the head of tourism on St. Helena. So what I'll be talking about is how we plot the road to recovery to bring back tourism. So St. Helena's community is one of the few on earth that has remained COVID-free throughout the pandemic. This has been achieved by imposing strict travel restrictions and testing regimes. We have a mandatory 10-day quarantine, which is about to be reduced from our next flight. On a small island where everyone knows everyone, the population is just under 4,500. Statistics here stop being numbers and start to have familiar names and faces. We can proudly say that not one person has died from COVID. But still, the combination of lengthy quarantine, irregular charter flights, and travel restrictions over the last 2 years have taken a very heavy economic toll. But before talking about our recovery strategy, let me give you a little bit of context about St. Helena. So we are one of the most remote islands on Earth. The island measures about 10 by 5 miles, and we're situated in the South Atlantic, some 1,200 miles from the coast of Africa. Until 5 years ago, you could only get here by sea, and that voyage took a minimum of 5 days. So we are very isolated. During much of its history, the island was of strategic importance for shipping and trade routes. This has given us a very diverse history and heritage, having been a place of transience for all sorts of nationalities, as well as a place of exile. This has made our community of some 4,500 people a true cultural melting pot. The island offers a wealth of spectacular vistas, microclimates, and geological features. We boast world-class hiking and diving and have some of the most important environmental sites, both land and sea-based, throughout the whole of the UK and overseas territories. But while St. Helena has an attractive product mix, punching way above its weight for 47 square miles, it is still largely unknown in the global marketplace. It's quite difficult to get to, and the flights are quite expensive. That's a fact. So much of our infrastructure falls well behind that of other established island tourism destinations. St. Helena shares characteristics and challenges with many other small islands. These include the distance from large economies, diseconomies of scale, skewed market competition, net out-migration, particularly that of skilled and qualified people in the economically active demographic. We have capacity issues and limited diversity of resources, leading to economic vulnerability. St. Helena, like many small islands, has, though, few other ways to generate external income except from tourism. And so pre-pandemic, the UK and St. Helena governments planned for St. Helena to open up to tourism as a main revenue generator to improve the island's economic and social development and to set the island on a sustainable path to self-sufficiency. To do this, the UK government funded construction of St. Helena's first and only airport, which opened in 2017. So overnight, the 5-day voyage by sea became a 5-hour flight. South African carrier Airlink began providing a weekly flight to Joburg between 2017 and 2020, and tourism numbers increased slowly but steadily. A second midweek flight from Cape Town was introduced during peak season. The potential of tourism as an economic, social, and cultural asset was slowly becoming apparent on St. Helena. Locals, or saints as we are called, were starting to realize, yes, you can make money from tourism. After the first year of commercial flights, the tourism sector and related businesses began to contribute significantly to St. Helena's economic growth, employing a few hundred saints. After 2 years of air-based tourism, St. Helena's biggest export was the provision of services to visitors. And these included both tourists and St. Heleneans visiting from overseas. Their economic contribution was significant. Tourist arrivals grew by 24% between 2018 and 2019, and visiting friends and relatives by 15%. But realistically, St. Helena only just had 2 years of tourism when the pandemic took over and the number of visitors plummeted rapidly. In financial year 2019-2020, approximately £5 to £7 million was expended on island by visitors. In the first year of the pandemic, this was reduced by up to 70%. Since April 2020, the only arrivals to come to the island have come via private or government-sponsored charter flights, on yachts, or on a monthly cargo supply ship. In the first year of the pandemic, there was a 90% decrease in visitors, some 250 arrivals for tourism and leisure compared to 2,500 the year before. The economic impacts of COVID hit the island hard and will continue to do so over the coming years. But as said, given that St. Helena has few other ways to generate external income, and despite the many constraints, tourism remains the island's key revenue generator. So how do we recover from this? The charter flights that provided the lifeline to the island during the last 2 years have been replaced by the usual commercial air service with South Africa, an action that is key to our recovery. However, flying to St. Helena has operational constraints. Flights are currently only operating every 2 weeks, and having just one service provider means no possibility for market competition through fare reduction and booking incentives. And a lengthy booking time and distinct and limited peak season all impact tourism-related income. Flight bookings for the first 6 months of our recommenced air service are currently well below anticipated numbers. The demand is building slowly. Thus, the scope for medium to short-term tourism growth is somewhat limited. Forecasts for St. Helena indicate that the island will not see a return to pre-pandemic visitor revenues until at least 24-25, so our season being early 25. Thus, the primary objective of our tourism recovery strategy in the short to medium term is quite simple, and that is to see a return to arrivals numbers experienced in 2019-2020 for season 24-25, with all the appropriate tourism and hospitality services in place to meet the needs of our visitors. There are a few sub-objectives to support tourism recovery, and these will include improving the visitor experience and increasing average spend, developing and diversifying our tourism product, strengthening and expanding our tourism services, increasing accommodation capacity, increasing destination awareness through targeted marketing campaigns, re-engaging and developing key markets, particularly increase the number of tour operators that sell to St. Helena, and finally, seeking ministerial approval to establish a St. Helena tourist port. And when we're back on track and when we start to see growth, we will aim to develop St. Helena tourism as an attractive model for divestment into the private sector. So how will this be achieved? These objectives will be implemented through our 3 main areas of focus, and these will be delivered through the sustainable development section of the St. Helena government. And they are product development and infrastructure improvements, marketing, and the third one, human capacity training and upskilling. However, an increase in visitor numbers, particularly one that is driven by tourist arrivals delivered through tour operators with a high seasonality factor, requires a trifecta of the following: regular flights, the assured availability of quality accommodation, and ease of booking for quality value for money services. In short, how to get here, where to stay, and what to do must all perfectly align. The key to developing St. Helena's tourism products, services, and markets will be to create a sustainable identity that protects and enhances the island's natural and human assets. But it won't be easy. Preparing the island for an increase in visitors, attracting sufficient investment, and developing quality accommodation, whilst we protect the island's fragile environmental, social, and cultural assets, presents a complex paradigm. For St. Helena to grow as a destination, it will be crucial that the island stands out in the global marketplace as culturally and historically important, one that has a destination with superb natural attributes, i.e. a must-see bucket list destination for the discerning traveler. The path to recovery and growth will have to include marketing efforts, creative product innovation, ministerial support, a unified and driven sector, and community engagement. The road to tourism recovery on St. Helena right now seems quite formidable, but positively and paradoxically, I believe the very attributes that constrain the development of tourism, the island's remoteness, challenges with access, and a lack of large-scale development, could actually be the island's greatest tourism assets if we market them effectively. A breath of fresh air is the summation and strapline that will drive the island's identity and stamp St. Helena on the map as a unique and special island destination as we reopen after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for that intervention and overview of the situation in St. Helena. Just a reminder to all of our attendees that there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session. I can see many of you active in the chat box already, sharing some comments, and that's fantastic. So please do go ahead and tell us in the chat if you have any comments. But if you have specific questions for our attendees, make sure you use the separate Q&A box, and we'll make sure that Matthew and our other speakers are able to answer those. You should just see on your screen right now a poll that I'm sharing with 3 questions. What region are you connecting from? Which sector do you belong to? And which industry do you belong to? So I'm just going to give you a few more seconds to fill that out. We'll be very interested to know at this time who is joining. I know that many of our audience are in the Americas, but I was actually surprised to see a few people joining us from the Caribbean at some very early time there. So great. Thank you for all of those. Okay, I'll just wrap up and share that poll. So we can see about a third of the audience joining are from the Pacific Islands, about a third from Europe, and then we have a spread of others from Africa, Asia, Middle East, and North America and the Caribbean. So a pretty diverse audience. About 60% of you joining from the private sector, but then others from academia and NGOs. And then a mixture of different sectors, including lots of people from the tourism, environment, and finance sectors. Great, that's fantastic. So thank you all for being here and for sharing that. I'm looking forward to your questions. With that, it gives me a delight to move to our next speaker. Diarmaid Lawler is the Associate Director at the Scottish Futures Trust, and I believe you just made it home to Edinburgh after a brief trip to the Scottish Islands over the last few days. Really looking forward to your perspective. So I'll hand over to you, Diarmaid.
Thanks very much, James, and delighted to be here. And thanks everybody for the opportunity to share some time with you. I've got just a small few slides just to set out a little bit of the work that we've been doing in Scotland around the islands and around the COVID recovery bit. So if you hold on there a sec, hopefully the slides come up. The power of technology. Here we go. So in front of us, I just want to talk about 3 things this morning, if that's okay. The first one is the nature of change. The second is the idea of place as a mechanism for managing change. And thirdly, how we might put in place a place-based investment framework. So looking at the change, looking at the geographies, the islands as a mechanism for coordinating change, and then looking at a framework for guiding investment. The image in front of you is the fantastic Lerwick. It's the center of Shetland. And Lerwick is a stunning place, like many of your own island communities. And like the Honourable Wayne Patton talked about, I thought it was a fantastic quote about islands at the nexus of land, sea and sky. Indeed, Lerwick is exactly that, but it's also at the nexus of change. And the island has been hugely valuable to the UK economy and the Scottish economy around oil, but it's transitioning and it's changing, and how all of that kind of happens. So the first bit, I suppose, on the change is on the bottom right-hand corner. You will see the National Islands Plan that was co-created across all of the island communities before the pandemic, and sets out 13 strategic objectives for what we, the island communities, see the future should be and how that future should be realized. So the first important component around change for us is co-creation. Second point then is in the COVID bit, and building on James's point and Matthew's point just around the way that St. Helena managed the COVID so excellently. It's the learning, it's the capturing of the learning of the community response to business resilience, about what we learned about ourselves, what we learned about others, and how we capture that. So we had the co-creation of the National Islands Plan, and then we have the COVID learning, which pivoted emergency funding interventions, but also then pivoted the way we think about how we realize the plan. So the second bit on the change is how we adapt existing structures using the learning from COVID to drive it forward. And the third bit, I think, is around how then we place at the front foot of the next steps agendas like community wealth building, agendas like just transition as as anchor points to be able to bring forward the investment that we need in the right way for the right things in the right order for communities. Building on that, the idea of a place, an island communities, island places as a context for change, how we coordinate the multiple activities of the private sector, the third sector, the government sectors, all kind of working so we can look at the totality of resources, not individual sectors in that place, aligned to the story of what we're trying to do in the right way. And in Scotland, we've built that around 3 bits. One is the idea of a place principle and expectation of collaboration across sectors using the totality of resources available. Secondly, a place-based framework, which is a consistent set of questions across all of the investments about how is this investment relevant to the community and how is it relevant to the transformation. And thirdly, a program approach supported by 325 million at the Scottish Government level, but also a 30 million at the islands level around how we bring that and support that together. That's supported by 3 expectations. Number 1, if we're trying to use the totality of resources in places to make the relevant impact for those places, the first piece is around accountability. And the tool we have, as I mentioned, is the place principle. So there's an expectation that we're going to work to it, and the accountability is peer-based and stress-based. Secondly, however we spend what we spend, however we do what we do, it should be conditional. It should be conditional on that expectation that we're all going to work together. So there's a conditionality frame around the way we spend money, the way we plan things, the way we come together. And thirdly, the complexity of managing change and embedding the learning from a COVID and moving all of that forward needs a program approach, a coordination approach. And coordination may be led by communities. In Matthew's point, coordination led by the tourism sector, but coordinating a suite of activities to make sure the impacts are relevant to the places and communities that we lead. Finally, some of the infrastructure to make that work, it can be very complicated, as a story, but in a sense, an island is a fantastic thing because it's bounded, and inside it, the lives and experiences of people are known. So we feel that there are 3 fundamental questions which should be applied to galvanize and coordinate the totality of resources across sectors to support COVID recovery and leverage the learning that we've gained as communities and use that to drive the change. So the first question is, when we're starting to look at how we change and move forward, the first question is, why is change needed? Not what, not how, why. It's building up a really clear and coherent case for change. Second, where does change need to happen, so that we're getting into targeting, almost like the acupuncture of intervention. And thirdly, a stress testing of what is actually going to make the biggest difference. And the output of that for us is a place brief, the story of change, supported by a simple diagram of where we think the change will be most effective, supported by a program then that sets out who does what, when, and how across the totality of resources, building on the COVID learning to ensure what we do is relevant. And I think it's about relevance. And our bit on relevance, I suppose, is about, if we really think about the relevance, then it's about helping everyone to live well locally. And so rather than big transformational ideas from outside coming out, it's how is it relevant to Lerwick? How is it relevant to Edie? How is it relevant for Matthew up in St. Helena? The diagram on the right-hand side, we've produced a place guide, and I'm happy to share that with colleagues, which then supports how we move through it. And we found across this little diagram, there's lots of bits and pieces in it, but the key parts are steps 1 to 3 are around building the conditions for success, building collective leadership. Steps 4 to 5 are shaping that story, co-creating, as we say, in the Lerwick situation. Steps 6 to 7 are just getting real clarity of what we're going to do and how. And step 8 is it's never finished, so a continuous loop. So with that, just to kind of thank you again for the opportunity and finish again on the Honourable Wayne Patton's phrase around that idea of the nexus of land, sea and sky, but also the nexus of agendas, the nexus of opportunities and the nexus of ambition. I think position islands fantastically to make the recovery possible, plausible and powerful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that intervention. I can see a few people in the chat asking for those diagrams and those ideas. So we really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to having a discussion and some questions on the implementation of that. I think also how these ideas can be applied in the global sense into other island communities. What we always want to try and do here is, I mean, really the philosophy behind our events is let's not reinvent the wheel. How can we take ideas from other regions? And okay, Shetland might be very different to Barbados or Fiji, but actually so many of these characteristics are common to all island communities. So how can we share those ideas? So we'll be back to you for questions in a minute. Thanks again, Diamond. And I'll invite our final speaker, Carolina, to come on screen if you're there, Carolina. Carolina is joining us from the Azores Islands in Portugal. I guess maybe as close to St. Helena in the middle Atlantic as to mainland Portugal. And the Azores Islands have done a fantastic job of promoting sustainable tourism, and that's very much Carolina's area of expertise. So if you'd like to give us some overviews on the work that is happening in the Azores, that would be fantastic. And then we'll invite all the speakers to come back and go into some questions. So thank you, Carolina.
Thank you so much, James. Good morning. Well, at least it's good morning here from where I'm speaking. It's 7:30 a.m. in the morning. And thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for everyone who are taking their time to be here with us today. So yes, I am going to talk about the Azores and how we are doing this recovery. But I want to focus more on this formidable future that we should work for. And first of all, I would like to just do a quick overview about how quickly is tourism recovering from COVID-19. And according to the World Economic Forum, tourists are spending an extra 1.8 billion nights in the European Union in 2021 compared with the year before. But this is still almost 40% lower than the pre-pandemic levels, according to EU statistics. Also, the pandemic has also exposed the existing vulnerabilities of tourism destinations, mainly for islands, for outermost regions, as for example, the Azores. We are an outermost region. We stay in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We are 9 islands with only 250,000 inhabitants. And we depend of mainly 3 economic sectors, which are tourism, fishery, and agriculture. So after exposing these vulnerabilities, it was crucial to adopt a strategy that is much more resilient, much more, it is smarter and much more sustainable. And that's exactly what we did. For those that don't know, the Azores have a multiplicity of natural, historical, and cultural resources that make it super unique. Almost 25% of the archipelago is classified as a protected area and managed by the natural parks. We have lots of good practices, tourists, like energy efficiency. One of our islands is totally efficient with 100% renewable energy, which is Graciosa, and it can operate in some days in fully renewable energy. All these vulnerabilities that the pandemic brought us has also brought some global tendencies. And the last Booking.com sustainability report says exactly that. So 81% of travelers confirm that sustainable travel is important to them, with 50% saying that recent news about climate change has influenced them to make more sustainable travel choices. Apart from that, travelers also feel safer if they know they are traveling to a more sustainable destination, a non-massive tourist destination. So here in the Azores, we wanted to reinforce that sustainable positioning. And what have we done? In 2018, we started the certification process of the Azores as a sustainable destination under GSTC criteria, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council criteria. And we are being certified by EarthCheck. And this certification brought us some tools, some management tools that makes the destination smarter, because we can't actually manage what we don't measure. So we are now measuring a lot of key performance areas, such as energy efficiency, greenhouse gases, air quality, light and noise pollution, potable water, territorial planning policy, transports, ecosystem and biodiversity, solid waste, society and culture, and economy. And to do so, we have involved as many stakeholders as possible in the destination. So collaboration is also crucial so that we can have a truly sustainable destination. We have involved all the public sector and many stakeholders from the private sector in order to come up with solutions for all these key performances areas and to get improvements on all this. So basically what we were doing is to give a response to all the existing vulnerabilities of the tourist destination that we were facing. So we can face the pandemic recovery with much more optimistic view, because we were the jobs and accommodation was much more vulnerable. The capacity for waste management was much more vulnerable as well. So now we are able to give a really much better response to all this. Apart from that, of course, during the COVID pandemic, the Azores has adopted strategies to encourage domestic tourism. As we are 9 islands, we could promote domestic tourism with a program called the Viver os Açores, and we encouraged Azoreans to opt for internal tourism in all islands of the archipelago. We also adopted the Clean and Safe Azores Seal with procedures of training, which gives visibility and effort commitment of the entire sector to ensure sanitary conditions. Also the regional government has implemented the Azores Fare, which is a tariff made available for SATA Air Azores, which is our local air company, which is part of the new subsidy for passengers on inter-island travel and is applicable within the autonomous region of the Azores. So with this collaborative approach and involving all these stakeholders, we have created also a sustainability action plan for the destination. And we have more than 30 sustainable commitments that are then subdivided in measurable, smart actions that are constantly monitored. Every year we launch a sustainability report, And we are constantly evaluating those actions and measures from all the stakeholders involved so that we can improve the local sustainability of all our services, of the environment, of the economy, and of course the social sustainability as well. And if you would like to know more about the sustainability measures and policies we are taking in the Azores, you can check all in our website, sustainable.azores.gov.pt. I can put it here in the chat. Another thing that I want to share with you is that in order to involve all the private sector in this goal towards sustainable development in the Azores, we have created another project called the Sustainability Charter of the Azores, which is an initiative to reinforce the sustainability development of the entire territory. And it aims to support the adoption of the 2030 Agenda principles in an inclusive and comprehensive way in the different sectors of our society. So this is a voluntary project. So every subscribing entity voluntarily adopts the 3 sustainable commitments that are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. This project started in 2017 with only 45 subscribing companies, and we now have almost 200 subscribing companies that are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and more than 700 sustainable commitments assumed by all these companies. To do so, we are implementing workshops in every island, specialized consulting, and we are preparing these companies for the European directives that are coming. For instance, the non-financial reporting directive, in which every company has to do sustainability reporting. So we have many companies from the tourism sector now doing their sustainability reports, and also from other main sectors from the Azores. So as you can see, we are bringing everyone together, being the private sector, the public sector, everyone together to adopt this sustainability commitments and to work in a same direction in the Azores. So basically the place guide that was just showed in the previous presentation, I believe that we are clearly adopting that in a very collaborative approach. So this was our way to define and rethink of a tourism model that can withstand the impacts of environmental and economic crisis and help prevent them. And this is our way to have a more resilient and more prepared sustainable destination for the years to come. This is our way to rewrite this chapter, to flip the chart and to create new solutions. Of course, we want always to learn from our other destinations, but this is our testimonial. I will share the link on the chat so that everyone can know more about what, in a more specific way, what the Azores are doing to promote sustainable tourism. And first and of all, a sustainable tourism destination must first be a sustainable territory and do well and do good all the Azorians and all the local people. Because if it's a sustainable territory, of course it will be and will promote a sustainable tourism, and will be a destination that is non-massive, and it is in balance, contributing with measures for everyone, where everyone will benefit, both the visitors and the inhabitants. So this was my testimonial for today. Thank you very much for all those that are listening to us.
Thank you so much, Carolina. I think it's really helpful and interesting to hear about the great work happening in the Azores. So many thanks for sharing that. I'd now like to invite the other speakers to come back on screen, and we'll go into the Q&A. Just a few comments from the chat, which I think is really great. Jessie Mello from Bermuda saying the Azores is the birthplace of her grandparents, a stunning landscape and beautiful people. And I know that there is a strong Azorian community in Bermuda. I'm curious, maybe Carolina, just on that topic, if the diaspora of Azorian emigrants, many people left the islands in the 50s and 60s, if they come into the tourism strategy as people who have Azorian descendancy, to ask them to come back to the islands. Carolina, did you get that?
I'm sorry, I was reading the Q&A.
Okay, no, I was saying there's someone saying that their grandparents came from the Azores, moved to Bermuda, and I was curious to know if this diaspora of people with Azorian descendancy, does that come into the tourism strategy? Do you have many visitors who have a heritage from the Azores? Jessie just said there is a new charter flight from Bermuda.
Oh yes.
Diaspora.
Yes, definitely. One of our markets is the missing. You don't have a word for that in English, but it's saudade. Mercado, the saudade market. The people that miss the Azores, the diaspora, of course. That return to their origins, to visit their families. And we have a huge market from there, yes.
Yeah.
And
so
you're always very welcome to revisit the Azores and your origins, of course.
No, that's great to see, and having those connections with the Azorian community in Bermuda and that direct flight between Atlantic Islands is really good. And that concept of saudade, that's a very Portuguese concept. I think the closest translation is maybe nostalgia, but it's not quite there.
Yes, it's not quite, but you're right.
The closest thing. And yeah, very important concept. Someone's just adding in the chat. And I also wanted to add something else that was coming up in the chat because of the timing of the session. We have a lot of people joining from the Pacific Islands, and I wanted to let people know in the Pacific, we're really pushing to have more involvement by doing more sessions at appropriate times and having more speakers. So Bula Vinaka, Talofa Lava, Aloha. I can see people joining from Fiji, Samoa, Niue, Hawaii. So really appreciate that, people joining from the Pacific, and would welcome your ideas on how we can have more involvement from Pacific participants in these events. So I have a question. I'll start with Matthew. This is also from Jessie, and who participates in our sessions a lot. Many of you will know that Island Innovation has really pushed this idea of remote working as an opportunity for islands. One, for tourism to develop a tourism market where people can stay long term and live on the island and work remotely, but also for people, islanders, to get more job opportunities that perhaps were not available before, but now with the growth of opportunities are. That even includes, we're currently recruiting a new position at Island Innovation for an account manager, which is a remote position. looking for people to apply to that, and that could be from anywhere in the world. And I think it's fantastic that these positions are now more available to give greater job opportunities for islanders. But the question is, specifically in the context of St. Helena, are you looking at remote workers or digital nomads, and how does that work? And I know there's a particular question with the internet and the cable, so maybe you can give us that context, Matthew, for St. Helena.
So one of our big challenges on St. Helena is connectivity. It's expensive and it can be relatively quite slow. However, the good news is that we have a fiber optic cable that's already been landed here. It isn't activated yet, and we're looking for it to be activated next year, which will provide great opportunities for digital nomads and for locals to work, to stay on the island and work without having to leave. So we've put a lot into having this cable connection, and I think that the possibilities that can develop from this are almost limitless. So roll around the fiber optic cable.
Absolutely, no, that's fantastic. Carolina, I think you have quite good connectivity already in the Azores. Do you have any comments on that particular question?
Yes, we are actually receiving so many digital nomads to work remotely in the Azores because we have great connectivity in every single island, even in the smallest island, which is Corfu. Corfu is an island with only 400 inhabitants, and we have a very good connectivity. Yes, we can say that.
Fantastic. And any speakers, if you do want to answer or jump in, you can use the raise your hand button or just give me a wave on screen. Diarmuid, were you going to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, no, just I suppose building on the remote working, it's a hugely interesting and exciting opportunity for Carolina and Matthew and colleagues on a fantastic. So just a couple of insights from Scotland just on that one. One is because islands are remote for some people that aren't from islands, there's the opportunity of using the island context for immersive work, so that people kind of coming here and that we create spaces for deep work, working with the community, so not just transactional work that you could do anywhere, but just something around immersive work. Secondly, on the remote working bit, it's also useful to start thinking about collaborative spaces that might host different people who might have well-being needs or access to network needs. So there's a bit of micro infrastructure that seems to be important to make the remote working. And then the final one, building on the diaspora idea, is around ecosystem links. A bit of a challenge on remote working is that we think of the worker with the laptop on the beach, but actually we need to think about the system of the connections between islands, between markets, between cultures. So those three things on infrastructure: ecosystem links, island-based. Secondly, leveraging the island experience for immersive work. And thirdly, around just thinking through what are the collaborative spaces to make the experience of remote working excellent and healthy for everyone.
And there's a fantastic example. Well, there's many fantastic examples of islands that have embraced this and built that infrastructure. One that we've had featured in a previous session is the island of Arranmore in the Republic of Ireland, which has a population under 500 and have built a specific space for islanders and visitors to use that has all the setup for remote workers, but is also has some of the highest internet speeds in the country. And so that infrastructure, I mean, the physical infrastructure is a big part of it, but also the community sense, the ability to interact with other people or have that space is also really important. We also, with Island Innovation, hosted a program recently in collaboration with the government of Montserrat in the Caribbean that have also looked at, they've also introduced a remote workers program. So Sarah or the team, if you can drop that in the chat, it would be good to share that for people interested in the topic. Okay, I can see some more questions coming in. One question from Julie Thomas, the Chief Minister of St. Helena, has asked, how easy was it to get the private sector to work together and collaborate with the government? And so more broadly, I think the cross-sectoral collaboration for islands is always key. We think of this for our events in terms of what's called the quadruple helix. Every project, how do you involve NGOs, the government, academia, and the private sector, the 4 key pillars. And of course, in most islands, government plays a significant role, a higher role than it would do in an equivalent continental area for various reasons. So I think that was addressed to Diarmaid, but I don't know, Carolina, who, if you also have comments.
Yes, I can just share my testimonial again. The first thing of all was to find a purpose. And the purpose is to reinforce the strategic position of the Azores as a sustainable destination. So after doing that, we traced a path, and we knew that path must be a collaborative path. So we divided the vision in sectors. So to achieve these, what do we need to do? So we need to involve the public sector to come up with solutions for the sustainable territory in the various areas, the various KPAs, let's say, because they are the responsible parties to promote solutions and operate in the territory in these several areas like agriculture, waste management, energy efficiency, whatsoever. And then you have the private sector in which you must involve as well in order to make progress on sustainable development through innovation, through solutions, through sustainability reporting as well. So we have, to do so, we have 2 meetings a year with at least 2 meetings a year with the public sector, involving as many entities as possible. Now we are involving 30 entities from the public sector, and we show them the main problematics of the sustainable destination, like some islands are lacking of water. There are some other islands have problems in waste management, and we ask them to come up with solutions for those problematic areas. And we created a sustainability action plan with their solutions. So the Azores DMO is working as a facilitator, as a catalyst for sustainable development, because we are the ones that involve all these parties together to bring up solutions to some of the main problems of the region. These public entities from the government respond to the most broader problems of the destination. We have 9 islands, and each island has their own specific problems. So we have also created green teams in each island. The green teams are composed by the local municipalities, because we have municipalities in each island. It's composed also by the regional director of the natural park, because in each island we also have a natural park, and NGOs, local NGOs. So we bring up all the elements of the green team together and reunite with them also at least twice a year, so that they can come up with specific local solutions, because specific problems of the islands are very, you know, we need to do like a tailor-made approach of those specific problems. We came up with an action plan for each island as well. Every year, we need to monitor these action plans and do sustainability reporting for each one of these action plans, so that we can constantly improve the measures and solutions that were put on table. Apart from that, we wanted to involve all the private sector. And the question was, how is the government also involving the private sector and collaborating with it? So we have basically launched this project, which totally voluntary. We do not. It is not mandatory for every company to subscribe the Sustainability Charter of the Azores. They do this in a voluntary way because they understand the benefits. And what are the benefits? The companies get more competitive because they can show in a transparent way that they are committed to sustainable development and to the sustainable development goals. They become more resilient, they become more prepared for future directives because we are in the European Union, and the European directive for the non-financial reporting is coming, and all companies are starting to be more prepared, and all of them are being capacitated to do this sustainability reporting in a tailor-made way. So we have SMEs, we have big organizations, we have all companies from the private sector contributing to this goal. So this is our way of doing progress in a very collaborative approach, involving also the local community in achieving sustainable development. But take notice that you can never say that, okay, we are now the first archipelago in the world to be certified under GSTC criteria, our work is done. No, this is a really wrong thing to say. Sustainable development is an ongoing process, and every year we must involve all these entities together, all the private sector, the public sector, everyone is to make improvements in sustainable development. So this is a process that will never stop. It's an ongoing process, and every year we must show transparency and concrete actions and results to the certifying entity as well. So every year we are doing progress on sustainable development. So we cannot say that we are a sustainable destination, period.
Exactly. There's no such thing as absolute
process.
sustainability, right? We always can be
Exactly.
more sustainable. No, thank you, Caroline. That was a really comprehensive answer, and I really appreciated that model and you sharing us to that.
Thank you.
We are at time, but I wanted to go, if our speakers can stay for a few more minutes to address a couple more questions. Diarmaid, I know you have to leave shortly, so maybe you just want to give your parting thoughts.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, James, and thanks everyone. I suppose just on that cross-sectoral piece around how you bring the different resources together, the different money together, our experience is it's around three things. So the first one, in different places, there will be different anchor collaborations that drive the change in a geography. That could be led by the private sector, it could be led by the community, it could be led by the state. So the key bit is who's the anchor and how do we wrap partnerships around it. Second bit is that particularly in the islands, I've observed people come back and people stay and they kick stuff off. You know, they manage to find a way of building a different house. They manage to find a way of sorting out a logistics issue. They manage to find, in Matthew's context, a way of doing tourism differently. Sometimes it's a young person, sometimes it's an angry older person, sometimes it's a bunch of persons coming together. So there's something around that initiation bit and how that can scale, but it's informed by pragmatic understanding of the problem and a passion to drive answers. Thirdly, deals. So I think the UK and Scottish experience of city and region deals is interesting. It doesn't always work, but that concept of a collaborative and shared mechanism for joint investment, which requires transparency, openness, and honesty around outcomes. So those three things I'd leave with you, James, if that's okay. Understand who's the anchor, wrap around it. Secondly, who's the agitator on the ground and how do we get around that? And thirdly, how do we structure deals, you know, different deals to do different things in the right way for the right reason with the right folk. I'll bid you adieu and thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. No, appreciate that. And I wanted to make a quick comment on some of the challenges. I think Carolina raised a really interesting issue. It's worth thinking about the difference in a archipelagic system like Azores, where you have 9 islands, 600 kilometers east to west, different levels of government, the local municipalities and the regional government, versus St. Helena, where you have a single island, one level of government. And obviously there are many different setups, but that definitely impacts how governments in the private sector can work together, and the type of models and the type of approach that needs to be taken. One final question before we wrap up for you, Matthew. I'm not sure whether you're going to like me for this question or not, but it comes up a lot. I know that the Napoleonic heritage is a big part of St. Helena's tourism, and I'm curious, how do you find that balance of embracing that, but also being more than that?
So to give you a little bit of context, and for those that don't know, Napoleon was exiled to St. Helena in 1815, and he died in 1821 on the island. So that would have meant that in 2021, we would have celebrated the bicentenary of Napoleon's death on the island. And there was a huge program of events surrounding this, with many stakeholders feeding into it. Even cruise ships coming here that were specifically chartered to be around the island for the specific date, which is the 5th of May when he died. Unfortunately, this was smack bang in the middle of COVID. And, the island shut down. There were travel restrictions, all of this we know. And so I think if we had been able to recognize and fully appreciate the bicentenary plans and the sort of commemoration celebrations surrounding that, I think it would have been publicized globally. Lots of people would have known about it. And I really think that it could have really helped raise awareness about St. Helena, but unfortunately, given COVID, it was canceled. So how do we deal with, how do we leverage our Napoleonic properties here? So we have Napoleon's house, which is a world-class museum. We have the tomb, and we have a place where he lived before he moved into his main house. So we have 3 major properties, and they are looked after by a French consul who's resident on the island. Just remind me of what was the main question, please?
Well, I think promoting that part of your tourism, but also ensuring that St. Helena is more than that, and making sure you have all the other aspects of the island covered.
I get you, sorry. So we often say on St. Helena that there's more to the island than just Napoleon and whale sharks. As I said in my short talk, St. Helena has a lot to offer. We pack a lot of product into a small area. It's getting that marketing done, and it's getting that publicity out there, so as people can book, come to St. Helena, and enjoy more than just the Napoleon and a few things that we're known of, like our walks. St. Helena offers a whole diversity of such diverse activities and tours. And part of our post-pandemic marketing is putting all of that out there. But we've currently been quite crippled with the pandemic. And of course, we are a small island. We're only 4,500 people. And with that comes limiting marketing budgets. Now, I'm not weeping and saying, but we have to do what we can with what we have. And I smile when I look at Carolina or listen to Carolina, and she's got 250,000 population. And with that population, you can do so much more. You've got all of these great established businesses that have, they're streets ahead of us. So we are only just beginning with our tourism. We've only had 2 real years of good tourism, and our strategy is to return to those numbers that we had pre-pandemic and build from there. And yes, there are lots of, I saw someone pop up there saying, yes, there are lots of opportunities for virtual, and that will come when we have better connectivity. So compared to some of the other island destinations, we are only in the fledgling stages. We're still just developing. So give us time, and let us get on the trajectory that will get there. And that will come with our post-pandemic recovery strategy.
Absolutely. And thank you. I think that was a great note to end on. We're all excited to see where these initiatives in St. Helena and the Azores and will go over the next few years and how they will develop. So thank you all so much for joining. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, James. You know, it's really interesting to listen to people like Carolina who are doing tourism on small islands, but they are sort of decades ahead of us. So even just listening today, we've learned some valuable lessons, and there are things that we can aspire to incorporate into our tourism strategy.
That's really good to hear. That's really good to hear, and we'll look forward to seeing how that develops. And with that, thank you to everyone who has attended. For those of you, it was an early morning. We appreciate that. And everyone who is watching the recording at a more reasonable time, we hope you also enjoyed the session. We do have a few more sessions left today, so hopefully we'll see you in a few hours for our Island Innovation Awards ceremony that's taking place later today. And then also we have another session later today on the future of coastal tourism and financing tourism. So many of you will be interested in that. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a wonderful weekend. And thanks from Island Innovation. Bye-bye.